Hello, welcome back. I guess this would be episode 3 of Stir Crazy, the show in which I teach you how to make cocktails from home while we're all stuck on lockdown. I heard today, not sure how officially, but it's going to be another couple of months potentially of lockdown, so I'm hoping this pause is going to last. If not, toward the end of the series, I guess we'll have to get pretty creative, see what we can make out of the dregs. As ever, I put today's cocktail down to a vote, and the people said they want to learn how to make an aviation. What I might do is, if there's enough appetite for it, if you want to see it, I might make both drinks anyway. The choice was between an aviation and the last word. Both are incredibly good drinks, both classics, both gin-based, both shaken. So there's quite a lot of similarities, but they do kind of differ, and they've both got interesting backstories. So if you feel like you fancy seeing 2 cocktails tonight, just make a little bit of noise in the live stream, and I can gauge whether there's appetite for 2. If not, we'll start and finish with the first one, which is the Aviation. The Aviation is one of my all-time favourite drinks, and I guess most drinks are my favourite drink, which brings me on to the fact that that's kind of the point of having a home bar. You would only ever make the drinks that you want to drink, right? So you're not having to try things you don't like. You don't have to purchase spirits you're not into. Somebody asked me yesterday after yesterday's episode, where would they start building a bar like this? This bar has taken me quite a long time to accrue. What I'd recommend if you want to build your own home bar is start with the spirits that you're going to drink, right? If you don't like tequila, don't buy tequila. If you want more information on building a home bar, I'll put some things together for that. But yeah, the Aviation, and also one of my favourite drinks. And that's predominantly because of this ingredient here. This is violet or violet liqueur. Anybody based in the UK especially may remember sweets, right? When you were a kid, there were these sweets called Parma Violets. Absolutely delicious. This is basically Parma Violets with alcohol, when you don't get much better than that. This is the backbone of the Aviation. But a fascinating story. Violet liqueur went out of production for a long time. So what ended up happening, if you see any sort of mid-20th century recipes, any specs for an Aviation will normally not have violet in there. It's just basically a kind of a twist on a gin sour, which for me is a kind of a pointless drink. The whole point of an Aviation is violet liqueur. So to kind of make an Aviation without that completely misses the point of the drink. In 2007, an American firm, I believe, revived Creme Yvette or violet liqueur, and it's back on the menu, right? So now we can drink Aviations again. This is absolutely divine. As with a lot of cocktail history, a lot of contention, and there's no real definite way of knowing the facts from the fiction. But my understanding of the Aviation is that it was a very popular drink among RAF pilots after World War I. So there was a club in London they used to drink at, and the Aviation was invented in that club. The name escapes me. Hence the popularity and the name Aviation. It is a shaken drink. We know it's going to be shaken because it has citrus. We've got some lemon juice in there. So purely based on the fact that it has citrus, we immediately know that this is going to be a shaken drink. So I'm going to grab some utensils. Shaken tins. Jigger. And measuring spoon, fine strainer, but there's a bit of a twist coming up soon. I won't give you any spoilers yet. And a Hawthorne strainer. As ever, we're going to start with the cheapest ingredient first, and I'm going to say that that is my sugar syrup. Simple syrup coming in at 7.5 mil. That's about 1/4 ounce for anyone using Imperial. 7.5 mil of sugar syrup. That's not a lot of syrup at all, and that's because the Aviation is quite a tart, quite citrusy drink. So 7.5 mil of that. Followed by my next cheapest ingredient, which I would probably say is the violet, purely because of how little we're using. I squeeze fresh lemon, always use fresh citrus, don't buy any sour mix from the store, that's just going to completely betray your drink. I've got a limited number of lemons in the house, but I've got loads of this stuff, and I use such a small quantity at a time. I'm going to put my violet liqueur in next. So on top of 7.5 ml violet liqueur, I'm actually going to put quite a generous amount in here. Most specs will call for about as little as 2.5 ml of Violet. This stuff is just my favourite thing, so I'm going to actually up this to 5 ml of Violet. This is going to give the drink such a beautiful colour. That's a very generous 5 ml. Next, 22.5 ml of the citrus, of lemon juice. And that's actually quite a lot of lemon, considering how little syrup we've got in there. This is going to be quite a tart drink. So, 22.5 ml of our lemon. So a good jigger will have markings on the inside of it. So when I'm twisting this around, I'm looking for internal markings pointing out 22.5 ml there. Next up, in order of kind of expensiveness, is this Maraschino Liqueur. There's a tendency for people to call it Maraschino Liqueur, but it actually comes from the Maraschino Cherry. And what I love about this stuff is it's made in a slightly different way to most cherry sort of drinks. Most cherry drinks just take the beautiful sort of lush flesh of the fruit. A kirsch or a brandy is going to just deal with the flesh. This stuff actually uses the stalks, the stones inside, and the flesh and the skin. So the resulting liqueur is a very earthy, very almost like woody kind of taste. It's really delicious. So quite a solid mouthfeel about it. A lot of people would fail to detect cherry at all when they drink this. It's definitely there, but the predominant thing is like an earthy kind of taste. It's really quite something. This, we're going to do 15 ml. 15 ml of our Maraschino Liqueur. And this is, since it's made with cherries, if you watch as I pour this, completely clear. And finally, the biggest ingredient by volume, and therefore ultimately the most expensive, we're going to be using 60 ml of gin. I really like Tanqueray for making cocktails. It's affordable. It's going to be used in large quantities. 60 ml at a time is quite a lot to be using. For cocktails, I would never normally recommend using a gin that you would use for a gin and tonic, unless you've got a very specific cocktail you're trying to make. Generally speaking, a London dry gin is all you want for making cocktails. Tanqueray is a good shout. Beefeater is a good shout. Don't go too expensive unless you really know what you're doing. That's not really rude. What I mean is, if a recipe's calling for a specific gin, there's probably a reason why. Otherwise, you can always get away with slightly cheaper stuff. This is going to be 60 ml. Now, as well as just being delicious to drink and quite fun to experience, if you know what I'm saying, another thing I really love about cocktails is just the sheer history, fascination, the trivia, the bit of odd detail, the kind of stuff that gets left to rumour and hearsay. The Aviation is no exception. There's a really interesting thing about the Aviation. This is a shake and drink, right? So as we shake drinks, we're agitating a lot of ice. The ice is going to begin to just disintegrate into smaller and smaller pieces. This is to be expected, right? We expect this to happen, but as the ice breaks into smaller pieces, each smaller piece melts faster than the last. So you get a lot of very quick dilution with this. However, because of these ice shards, this is exactly why we double strain a shake and drink. Any drink that we shake, we strain it through a coarse strainer, and then pass it on its way into the glass. We pass it through a fine strainer, just to pull out any last little bits of shards of ice. Not with the Aviation, right? The Aviation, for no real reason, there's no scientific reason, there's nothing about the ingredients that mean this is the case. But for whatever reason, it's just decided that the Aviation, you don't fine strain it. And maybe it's kind of a bit of confirmation bias or whatever, or kind of after the fact justification. The kind of rumour is that Aviation, right, you're thinking of the sky, the drink's going to be blue like the sky, leaving shards of ice just floating across the top of the glass are reminiscent of perhaps clouds in the sky. It's a very obscure bit of cocktail trivia that genuinely most people aren't aware of. So if you ever order an Aviation in a bar, and your bartender does not double strain this drink, I guarantee you've got a very good bartender there. That's someone who knows their stuff and is worth listening to. So I'm going to grab both a glass and some ice, shake this, strain it, serve it, and then, like I say, if there's enough appetite, we'll move on to the next drink. Back in 1 second. So, as ever, I put my ingredients into the smaller tin, my ice goes into the larger tin. You want to be using a fairly generous amount of ice. Pour the ingredients from the smaller tin into the larger one. And these tins, these 28 ounce 18s, 28 18s, are just so nice to work with. We just need a little bump. That's sealed. You can hopefully hear there, the ice does, you can hear it kind of mushing, you can hear it beginning to disintegrate. To take these apart, also, I don't know if you can see this, these are really, really cold, like really cold now. That's caused both tins to contract, get a really good handle on each other, a really good grasp on each other. To release these, done. What I'm going to do is just single strain this, not double strain this drink into this coupe. I'm using a coupe for no real reason other than that's all I had handy. What I'd like to do is kind of audit my glassware and get some nicer glasses in. A coupe's normally going to be a good glass for an egg white drink, but for whatever reason, other than it's the first thing I grabbed, we're going to serve this in a coupe. So because I'm not fine straining this, I can already begin to see ice shards. And that colour, hopefully you can see through the frosted glass, the colour of that drink is just beautiful. You've got two options now for garnishing this drink. You could express some lemon peel over it and then drop that in the top of the drink. What I'm going to do, and is quite a common thing to do, is I'm going to use a Maraschino cherry. We've got the cherries in the brandy. We'll complement that with, oh, where have they gone? Here they are. There's a whole load of this pot you can't even see. These Luxardo Maraschino cherries are like little balls of crack, right? These are delicious. These are really, really divine. They taste almost like marzipan. They're in a really, really thick syrup. And they're just some of the best cocktail cherries you can get hold of. What I'm going to do is, taking my bar spoon, I'm going to fish out one cherry, but try and slightly drain it as I do so. What I don't want to do is get it covered in this thick, viscous syrup. I want to try and leave as much of that behind as I can. So what I'm going to do is just gently try and just hoik one out while kind of draining it. I'm going to drop this cherry as squarely as I can into the centre of the glass so it just drops straight to the bottom. Come on, there we go. Then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to get a bar spoon of this syrup and try and gently, vertically trickle it into the very middle of the glass so it kind of wells and pools at the bottom. So that by the time we finish the tart, really sort of citrusy, sharp Aviation, we'll have a tiny amount, we're talking less than 3 millilitres, a tiny amount of syrup just to finish the drink. So if I can just try, get a stream of that going, there we go. That's just going straight down and welling in the bottom of the drink. Cosmetically, looks kind of nice, I guess, but by the time we finish that very, like I say, very tart, very citrus drink, when we arrive at that cherry, we're in for a treat. So, there we have an Aviation. Cheers. I'm going to rinse some equipment. If you do want to see me make the last word as well, just like I say, make some noise in the live stream. I'll check it really quick. If there's enough appetite, we'll move on. I'll make you another fascinating drink called a last word. We'll be back in 1 second. Okay, so if you can, just give a little nudge, give a little wiggle, give a little whatever it is you do on a live stream. I'm not sure what it is. If you just make a bit of noise right now, I'm going to try and get behind the phone and take a look. And if we want to look at the second drink, can you even see me? Then let's do that. Cool, right, I'm going to go ahead and do it. So, a couple of the ingredients are staying the same. We're going to change a few out. For our next drink, the last word. So, I'm going to need gin once again, but this time I'm swapping out to Beefeater. Beefeater is a really boozy, really nice, stiff London dry gin. Honestly, I could not really tell you why I'm swapping from Tanqueray to Beefeater. I think it's just that the next drink coming up is less tart, and it's actually got some bigger flavours, and interestingly, all the flavours are going to be in equal quantities. So what I want to do is have a fairly sort of, well, beefy, right, gin to hold up against some other quite strong flavours. So, gin, the Maraschino Liqueur is staying out. Instead of lemon this time, we're going to use what little lime juice I have left. And the main event, the big deal, the pièce de résistance, I guess, is this. Green chartreuse. So the chartreuse comes in yellow and green. This stuff is just off the scale. I am in love with this stuff. So chartreuse is a French herbal liqueur. The green stuff comes in at an eye-watering 55%. This is strong. If you can hold your booze and you want to sort of have a shot with someone, go for chartreuse, see how they handle it. Fun story, actually. I befriended a bartender in Paris 2 or 3 years ago. And after they finished work, we went for a bit of a night out in Paris together, but we set a rule, and the rules were all we can drink all night is chartreuse. It could be a chartreuse-based cocktail, it could be chartreuse topped up with, I don't know, a tonic water or something, or it could be shots of chartreuse. And I'll tell you this, there is a unique thing, there's a unique side to a chartreuse hangover. It's not like any hangover I've had before. Really delicious stuff. It's quite a fascinating drink. Well over 130 herbs and botanicals in there. And this is true, I promise you, only 2 people at any given time know the recipe for this. It's a very closely guarded secret. And those 2 people are Carthusian monks, right? So it's made by monks in France. And there are only 2 people at any given time allowed to know the recipe. It's that closely guarded. Green is, like I say, comes in at 55%. I believe the yellow version comes in around 45. Well, we can just verify that. It comes in at 40, actually, so the green is quite a lot stronger. Now, the drink we're making, the last word, is interesting for a few reasons. It's one of very few cocktails that has equal part ingredients. So it means we're going to use the exact same amount of everything, which is quite unusual. Another cocktail that does that, you're probably familiar with, is the Negroni. The Negroni is an equal parts drink. By and large, most cocktails would not be equal parts. So that makes the last word immediately a little interesting. Another interesting thing about the last word is it was invented, I think, around 1920 at the Detroit Athletic Club. It's a very simple drink, but even still, nobody thought to write down the recipe. So the actual recipe, the spec for the last word, didn't arrive in print until 1951 in Ted Saucier's Bottoms Up, right, a book about mixing cocktails. So the next time you complain about a lack of documentation, imagine going for 31 years without a recipe for this drink. It's a shake and drink, again, because of the citrus. I'm going to retrieve my, my bar kit, because that should be dry now, and let us build a last word. All right, so very, 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 very simple drink to construct. Equal parts, and it's just going to be 30 ml, which sounds like a lot, because it kind of is. 30 ml of everything. My cheapest ingredient is my lime, so straight in with 30 ml of that. Next up, I say I've got a lot of gin in the bar, so I'll do 30 ml of my gin next. I can afford to, if I need to, if anything goes wrong, I can afford to lose a little bit of gin. I mean, you'd have to be particularly bad to mess up an equal parts cocktail, but I've been known to do stranger things. Next, we'll go for the maraschino. 30 ml of this. And finally, 30 ml of my green chartreuse. Man, this stuff is good. It's quite syrupy, quite viscous, so what will happen if you don't use it for a while? Your lid will kind of, sugar crystals will kind of fuse the lid to the bottle. And finally, 30 ml of chartreuse. This is a pretty boozy drink. The Maraschino Liqueur is alcoholic. Obviously, gin is. This is very alcoholic. The only non-alcoholic ingredient is going to be the lime. So it's going to be quite important that we do shake this down correctly. We need to make sure we get the correct dilution by giving this a real solid shake. So back in one moment with a glass and ice. Okay, as ever, ingredients in a small tin, ice in the large tin. Pour those together. A real solid, sharp shake. And nothing special about the way we serve this drink. We are going to fine strain it. We will double strain this. At this point as well, what you can do, please don't judge me too harshly. These are plastic straws, but they've been down there for about 5 years, so it was before we really started to care about the planet, I guess. To verify this drink is on the right track, you can just grab a bit of a straw. Actually, the importance of tasting early and often, that could be diluted a little bit more, I reckon. It's coming out quite hot. Naturally, if you're making drinks for friends, you would not use the same straw twice, but perfect, nailed it. This drink will be fine strained. Got my 4-horn strainer. And for whatever reason, I've decided for this one, I'm using a martini glass. This drink requires no garnish. You could get a lime peel if you wanted, but it's kind of just nice to look at that on its own. The colour is really quite, I don't know, just very uniform. Almost, I would say, milky. That's provided almost entirely by the lime juice. The last word is very refreshing, but very boozy drink. I wouldn't recommend a full evening of them. But if you're a fan of anything like a classic daiquiri, for example, or a Southside, this is going to be in your kind of remit. This is the kind of drink you would enjoy. I know I certainly do. So cheers. There's our last word. Oh yeah, nailed it. Cool. Well, thanks for joining me again. That was episode 3 of Stir Crazy. I'm going to enjoy myself a couple of drinks, see the weekend out, and I will catch you next time. Cheers for joining.